First, thanks for asking me to come along today, because when I was asked, I thought, yeah, I'm going to get up at 4:30 this morning, get on that plane, come, and I'll go back and I'll be sleeping in my own bed tonight, because it's really important for me to get up tomorrow to ride my bike, because I feel very strongly about what you're doing and about what the NHMRC are doing, particularly around this issue of translation and research. And so to come and speak to you about my experiences in translation and leadership were something that I thought, yeah, because I'm going to be learning stuff as well. And so as I've been sitting at the back with my ear, like I said, blinkers off, ears open, and grasp any opportunity you can to learn. And so I feel with some kind of, you listen to the voice, you were talking about that voice in your head, I think that's healthy, I just like to say. The day I strut out of that operating theatre thinking I have done the best job I can is the day I hang up my boots. That self-doubt is healthy to a point. And so I was just going to say, I think I could actually talk about translation with some kind of authority. And then that voice came and said, oh, be careful how you say that, you know? You better be careful. Because it's where I've lived, and I forever. And I'll sort of talk to you a bit about how my career has developed. And then you'll see how this sort of leadership issue emerged. Why I said to you earlier, don't fool yourselves. You know? So I kicked in at med school in 1975. I'd come through school, I was into science and maths, I wanted to go to Cambridge and do maths and physics, and my mother and my elder brother had a tape running underneath my bed saying you have to be financially independent of the male, you have to do something useful for society, and it must have gotten through because I went on a weekend before my university form was supposed to go in. On the Monday, the UCA form, I went to London on the Friday night. I had one hell of a weekend. My brother was at St Thomas's Hospital Medical School, and I came back and changed my form, and I went to medical school. I arrived there and very quickly realized I was going to be a surgeon. Why? I was fascinated by the anatomy. Anatomy was and still is my great love. The way we are actually pieced together is exquisite. And so if a surgeon puts this together, that's what I'm going to be. I was one of 12 women in the class, and I learned very early on about this negative energy business. Because whenever I said I wanted to be a surgeon, I was told, oh, women don't do that. And I said, well, you know, I'm really good at embroidery, does that count? I thought, and I learned really on not to make everybody else's problem mine. And deflected with humour, deflected by ignoring, but that wasn't my problem. And my problem was, how am I going to get from this point, from a kid the wrong side of the traps from the north of England, in the most conservative medical school in the country, where one of my mates I did a BMed Sci with is actually Baron Colthurst, who was Diana's confidant. You know, they had more Porsches and BMWs in the car park, and that was undergrad. You know, I was like, what have I come to? You know, and I'd gotten there because my brother was a rugby player, and they liked to win they'd like to have a crack at the rugby cup, like in the hospital cup, and so I'd kind of got in on his coattails. And they had a number of kids, actually I was the only girl, from that grammar school, the boys' grammar school, because they were rugby players. So there I was, and I stood back, and it was a strategic decision. I need to make my CV different from everybody else's. So when I go to get the job, sorry guys, and I will be better than the guys, because then they can't ignore me. If I'm the same as, they can ignore me. If I'm better, they can't. And it was a strategic, deliberate decision very early on. And my brother, who was a couple of years above me, was already doing some research work with the plastic surgeons. Plastic surgery, I think, is still exciting. You know, it's extreme makeover, yeah, but it's extreme rebuild, you know. And the fact that we were doing a lot of work around microsurgery, where you could take the muscle from the back, wrap it around the leg, save a leg of a young man who otherwise would have lost it after a motorbike accident, for example. Putting your toe onto your thumb. They, you know, obviously I don't get out much. But anyway, so it was exciting times, and there was a lot of need to understand anatomy in exquisite detail. So that when the surgeons go into the operating room, they go straight into the anatomical dissection, they get the right bit of muscle out. For example, I know the gracilis muscle from your knee to your hip, 10 centimetres below the obturator foramen, there is a 10 centimetre pedicle, which is really good because it's a long, thin muscle, it's on a long pedicle, and you can put it in under the microscope somewhere else really relatively easily. And so that anatomy was where I started. That was where my research career started. And it was geared totally, 100% towards understanding the anatomy for surgery, understanding that we wanted to change the way we practice plastic and reconstructive surgery in order to offer better solutions for people who are injured. And all the rest that sort of flowed on from that. It was clinically driven, absolutely clinically driven from day dot. So that's when I sort of stood up and thought, oh, I could talk about translation with some kind of authority. The first thing I ever did was about that. But I also stepped back and reflected that, in fact, sometimes the roots are a little bit more sort of windy, bendy, so, yeah. Not so clear anyway, I can't think of the word. Because I did a BMed Sci and I did neuroanatomy and anthropology. And I went to East Africa and worked on the Leakey camp as a fellowship. And I looked at postcranial fossilization and how it related the locomotion changes on the fossils that of bipedal animals change the brain. You know, so we can go from like this, you change your brain, yeah? And I did my thesis on brain, the evolution of the brain from worms to elephants, really clinically driven, right? Okay, I'll get back to that. And so all the way through, I have absolutely been focused on every bit of energy that we have has to have a pathway to opportunities for therapy. And that's why I'm so interested in what you're doing here and listening to reading your bios and thinking, yeah, that really makes sense. Yeah, that's good. You know, because there's an awful lot of knowledge out there, and we walk into a hospital on a daily basis and you see so much stodge, so much opportunity for excellence. And it's just not there. And so groups of people like this are really fantastically important in actually coalescing those little bots of excellence so that we can start to almost reach out to each other. So as I said, I've been very focused all the way through on solving clinical problems. The first paper I ever wrote in 1986, published, was in the British Journal of Neurophysiology. And I think it's always really important to question, because we were told tissue expansion is a technique that, again, around about that same time was introduced, where if a child is burnt on the scalp and this is bald, I could put a balloon underneath the hair-bearing scalp. I can blow it up serially through a valve. It takes about 3 months, and I get a seriously interesting-looking head. But I've created new skin. It's stretched, yes, to a point, but the dry weight DNA is increased. The vasculature is increased, the hair follicles are increased, and then I can take this scar out and there we have a normal head of hair. It's a great operation, a series of operations. And we were told at the time that the nervous system is static and that the sensory integrity in that skin will be diminished. And so I thought, that doesn't make sense to me, because my belly's going up and I'm testing two-point discrimination, because don't we all, you know? I mean, you've got, you know, and it didn't seem to be in line with the teaching of the time. So I contacted Dow Corning, and I think one of the things I find interesting these days with people coming up, there's regulations around us. I think, you know, I've got a very healthy respect for the TGA. For example, it keeps me safe as a practitioner, keeps me safe as a medical device, director of a medical device company, it keeps me safe as a patient. I have a healthy respect for working with our regulatory authorities, but I think it's fascinating that people are saying, oh, I can't do that, or before they say they can. Because as a registrar in London, sitting there with a two-point discrimination on my tummy, I rang up, I found the number for Dow Corning in America, and they made me 1 centimetre tissue expanders I put in a rat. I found somebody, I can't remember exactly who gave me the money, it was the Sheridan School of Physiology, but I think they were just so bemused that this registrar would turn up with these tiny expanders that they taught me how to put them in the rat. And they funded the project with one of who's now a physiologist in King's. And it taught me how to do single axon recordings of T11 of the rat under the microscope. Because I asked. And when he said no, I said, are you sure? And then I went back and asked again. Pestering has value, you know. You just, well, why can't you? It's problem solving. You all must be in the space of problem solving, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And all in the space of, well, actually, okay, if you come against that brick wall, there's two ways to deal with it. You smash your head against it or you walk around. Yeah, and so that was really interesting to me because it has led on to work that I'm currently doing. As around the houses to get to the cement mixer, as my chemistry teacher used to tell me at school. So I was in a situation clearly embedded that I wasn't going to, as my husband's a real cynic, he says you believe nothing of what you hear, only half of what you see, you know, and then you question it. He's a general surgeon. And so that kind of idea, why is not a bad question to ask, and that was embedded in me by the time I got to Australia in 1987. I got through the various hurdles, and by 1991 I was director of the Burns Service of WA. I was registrar on Friday, director on Monday. Could have been really embarrassing if there was any other alternative because there was no other applicant. And so that was an opportunity. I thought, I've made it. I remember the same feeling that I remember as a 13-year-old. I changed schools. As I say, I'm from the north of England, and my parents had left school at 13 and 14. They were sort of working class folks who were living in an environment where they just changed the education system. I'm trying to explain it really quickly, but so I was destined to go to comprehensive school leave at the end of year 10. And there was no choice. My brother, 2 years older, had got to grammar school before the grammar school places got closed behind him in that area. So there was no opportunity for year 11 and 12 for me at that time in the public system. It was a really odd quirk. It was this transitional time between the grammar schools and the comprehensive system at a time when then it sort of all got rejigged. So I was caught in an awkward spot, and my mum got a job at a Quaker high school. A school that had been a co-ed Quaker school since the 1700s. And she went there to ask for a job as a house mother, and she came out as the phys ed teacher, and I went, because she could talk the talk, and then I went as a 13-year-old. And I remember really clearly standing there that day when I had this most amazing school uniform, you know, because I was like, oh, it's so cool. I didn't give a damn it was second-hand. You know, I just thought, it's great. And she looked at me and said, grasp the nettle with both hands and don't let go. And there I am, fast forward, January 91. I thought, yes, bring it on. I'm in charge. Of all this, you know. Be careful what you wish for. I inherited a multidisciplinary team, a very solid clinical team. There was absolutely no research capacity, no research capability. The only research done in plastic surgery in Perth at the time had been done by me in the previous 2 years, whilst as the registrar. And so to say that that was done on a smell of an oily rag would be exaggerating. There was no infrastructure that I was aware of. And I had a clinical workload that was challenging, to say the least. And so off there I am. And in 1990, I'd had a patient who I think of often because she saved the lives of so many people. So we have two ways of learning, you know, sort of situational and then scientific, if you like, you know. And so there she was, 70% burned, 56 years of age, as a domestic violence incident, 5 months post-injury, and she was sliding through our fingers like sand. Every time we put a skin graft on her, she was infected, the waves of infection coming over, she was getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and I'm standing there as a registrar feeling powerless. And I'd heard on the radio as I was driving between the hospitals that Joanne Padlaneski from here and Professor John Masterton from the Monash were growing skin. Like, wow. So I got a lot, again, you don't take no for an answer. I called in so many favours. I got Ansett to take skin from Perth to here and back with Joanne and John Masterton. We went into the bone marrow labs in the middle of the night and used their clean rooms to harvest the skin. We put all the skin on this lady, flasks and flasks and flasks of it. 3 weeks it took to grow here. And she healed. She got off the ventilator. She was out of intensive care. And she was walking down the corridor at 7 months post-injury when she died suddenly. And she had a mycetoma in the right atrium because she had fungal infection for having a lack of skin for so long. So that was around Christmas time 1990. We were a year ahead. And I hit that ground running. A day in the birth unit is a day too long. A day in that level of pain is a day too much. We have to do better. We've got to understand what is out there on the landscape. We have got to bring everything we can into this environment so that we can change those lives of the people going forward. No problem. So we started, and the first thing I learned is money matters. And you said earlier that you can do a lot without money. You certainly can. You stand back from, we get so busy, we're too close, and we can't see the fact that the inefficiencies are all around us. Step back, and we did 12 patients where we sent the skin from here, from Perth to here. And I said, I'd met Marie Stoner in the bone marrow labs because the skin came up back overnight. I knew how to process it now. I was working in the lab overnight. Then I'd go to theatre during the day, not sustainable long term. I had my eldest used to come with me because he's always been an early riser. So we'd hit the lab at about 3:34 and he loved the liquid nitrogen coming out. And I got called to his art class because him and his mates built a skin incubator. So I was saying at the break, he does engineering and science and is building his own medical devices. But so there I was, I'd connected with a kindred spirit, and that's really important. Connecting with kindred spirits. Marie was completely start raving bonkers as well as I was, because she's there in the middle of the night getting the bone marrow ready for the patients the next day. She always used to go in and double check. When I'm down that bottom corner, I've got an idea. She's the one that's, oh shit, here we go. Right, okay. And it was a fantastic team. She came into theatre, I went into the lab, and we meshed. So by 1993, we had funding to start our own lab. But it was based on costings that within 6 months, we were saving money. And so by the 12 months, the system was actually ahead. And so we were able to change our length of stay dramatically because I said, Marie, you come over and work with me, but we've got to do it in 10 days. It's everywhere around the world does it in 21. We've got to do it in 10. If we can't nail 10 days to grow this stuff, we can't use it. And if we can nail it in 10 days, we pay for it in 6 months because we're not keeping people in hospital. And it was she did it. She was fantastic. It was a slam dunk. She did all the smart stuff. I did the simple things like, if I take a biopsy today instead of tomorrow, we save a day. Yeah. Smart like that. And so it was a really interesting time because it was my first taste of leadership. This great multidisciplinary clinical team, people who had been embedded, people who had been there taught by my great mentor, Harold McComb, who's now in his early 90s, who taught me never to be satisfied, never to think today's good enough, always to make sure that tomorrow's journey starts afresh. And so I'd taken over this, and it was probably not long after our first 12 months of our first skin culture, we'd had some massive survivors. We'd had a 92% young man, 29 years old, surviving, a high school science teacher getting back to work. We'd had some big wins. We thought we were, the ants' pants. And we'd done it all on the smell of an oily rag. And one of the social workers stopped me in the corridor. And it was probably about 94, halfway through, and said, "Stop." That feeling that there's something wrong, but you don't know what it is? And I go, yeah. No, Fiona, stop. And I go, okay, yeah. Come and sit down. I'm thinking, oh shit, this is really serious, because I don't do that often, And so there I am, I'm sat down, and she sits down, and she's a lot older than me, and she'd been there a long time. And she said, "Fiona, we all know that you're excited and you're passionate about what you're doing, but none of us know what it actually is. We can't explain it to the patients. We can't explain it to the patients' families. We can't actually be part. We feel like we're losing connection with you. We can't be part of what you're doing because we don't know what it is, because you're not telling us. And I think it was a real absolute brick wall for me, because I just thought I'm approachable, I'm excitable, but I'm approachable, you know, and I'm not intimidating. But I was given a lesson in intimidation can take many forms. I'd come through a surgical training where intimidation was when the surgeon throws something at the wall. Not when intimidation wasn't being so enthusiastic that it's a real serious put-off. Like, what are you talking about? That's not intimidating. And it was a really good opportunity before I got too far down the track to actually stand back and think about this issue of leadership. And think about what it was that I could bring to the table. Because I was surgeon, I was team leader. No education, no training in the regard of leadership, but I was just there. Wasn't that good enough? Hey, I'm sure you've all worked with surgeons that they think it's good enough because they're probably so intimidating that they weren't told. So, which was my comeback. I said, well, I can't be that bad because you're sitting me down. And so I realized that everybody at the table was there for a very good reason, whether they're our therapists, our nurses, our dietitian, and in our environment, our cleaners are integral. The cleaning staff in the burn unit have been there as long as I have, and we're the stayers, because we can live or die on that. And so when they try to change our cleaning regimes and try to shift our cleaners elsewhere, I chain myself to the front of the burns unit, because they're part of our team. So everybody brings something to the table, otherwise they shouldn't be there. And it made me respect that, understand it, and more importantly, live it. As a result, a number of our team, our clinical team of higher degrees, in fact all the senior level have, a number of our nurses are going through that process, the juniors coming through. It's something we don't, it's not an obligation, it's an opportunity. If you ask a question, then we will facilitate answering that. And we backfill clinical time and things, because we have sold more Lamingtons over the years, so we have a capacity here and there to fund so particularly our clinical team. Running parallel to that is our science team, who actually answer the questions that we raise in the clinical environment. And we have a population health arm that's just building, where we've looked at data linkage around a particular clinical case where we had an 8-year-old in 2003 who survived an 85% full thickness burn but died 3 years later of a rare tumour that was not with no risk factors. And so we've spent a lot of time funding a data linkage arm. And we have found there is a link to cancer. We have found that if you're burnt by the age of 5, you've got a 10-fold risk of being dead by 20. And we're now working with basic scientists, immunologists, and neurophysiologists trying to work out why. So, but all driven by that patient, that life that has changed in an instant, in my case, by burn trauma. So I learned early on that leadership wasn't something that was intrinsic. It was something you had to work at. And it was something that actually gave more than you gave back more than you gave, because you can't be a leader without a team, and without an effective team, you are a whole lot less effective. Because we live in an environment of bioinformatics. How can one head have all that in it? We live in systems that are complex, and we have to work within those complex systems, and we have to have collaborators within them, and we have to have that energy to connect with them. And so we have to have the energy to lead. And we have to understand that there's a leadership potential in each individual at different times, the ebbs and flows. And we need to facilitate that. It may not be somebody's bag to lead the whole team, but to lead an aspect within it. And we have to be receptive to that and understand. So as I quickly sort of try and do my brain dump of my life in 30 minutes, come to the change for me. It was in 2002, the window to our world opened at the Bali bomb 10 years ago, and people wanted to know what we were doing. Prior to that, we tried to tell them in order to get funding, and nobody wanted to know. At that point, people wanted to know, and it was very, very enlightening. As a result of that, I was asked to talk on leadership in Melbourne, and I'm a sucker for a challenge. I'd never done it before. I had really no idea. And I said, oh yeah, I'll do that. It'd be good for me. It'll be good learning. See, I'm completely naive, sucked in. I arrived here, and well, it was the day before, because, you know, thinking about it any further in advance would have been wasteful. So there I'm the day before, I think, oh, leadership steps tomorrow, okay. Intuition, I lead by intuition, right? Look it up in the dictionary, intuition, action without thought. I thought, Houston, we have a problem. And I thought, oh shit, no. So I was quickly looking at things, and then I realised that what I needed to express was the fact that I live in an environment of a very flat pyramid. I have a great deal of respect for all my team members in the population health, in the basic science, but in particular clinical delivery. And that Burns team works in another system in the health department and in the universities. I have respect for and connection there. I have a very Quakerly approach to things. Everybody is equal, everybody has a voice. That's come from my upbringing, from my high school days, when our school motto was not for oneself but for others. I take that to the table, but when hits the fan, I have absolutely no hesitation in stepping out in front. When somebody has to call the shots, I have absolutely no hesitation in doing so. I still have the voice at the back of my mind, what gives me the right. But I also have in my mind the understanding that if I don't step forward, then how can I sleep nights? And that for me is on a daily basis. When I'm faced with somebody with a burn who is hypothermic in the emergency department, everything's going on, I step forward and I take the lead and I teach, because that person will live or die. If I stand back too long, there'll be more problems. And I can stand back increasingly as the team have come up. Particularly, I work with a consultant who's 12 years my junior. I can stand back. 2002, there was nobody in that space. And in the Bali time, I was on the top of a very, very skinny pyramid. It felt disconcerting. It felt unusual. It felt like I was in a bubble. People I would all normally have robust discussions with just said yes. Okay. And I walk on, and I say, in order to treat these 28 people, unless we treat them as if every one of them was here as an individual, we shouldn't be treating them at all. In a room with many people, from stores to theatres to anaesthetics, etc. And they all went around the room and said yes. And one person who had been particularly robust in their discussions with me over the years said, we've got 3 hours, we meet back here in 3 hours, and everybody has to solve the problems that, in their area. And I just went, interesting. She stood to step forward. And so we went on and we delivered in 5 days a massive surgical program. And everybody did as I said. I went home, I go home at night and I said, whew, yeah, whose wet towel is this? And I go home a week later, and whose wet towel is this? And there I am in a decision-making process where everybody did what I asked. And I felt like, whoa! And then I go home and it's back to reality. And so I came to the conclusion, which I guess is what I was saying a bit earlier, that leadership has to be flexible and responsive to the situation. And it has to, for me, has to be based on integrity and honesty. And if I don't know, I will say it before you've asked the question. Excuse me. Because I think that is vital. You cannot be anything other than brutally honest, and in particular with yourself. So if I don't know, you'll know I don't know. But you will also be part of the finding out. And that brings us right back to the translation, because what we do today is not good enough. Across the board, you may strut, you may think you're doing a great job, but you're all here because it isn't actually intrinsically good enough. Because tomorrow is going to be better, and you're part of that. So, thank you very much.